Hello. As you can see, today I'm talking about 1775 Rebellion. I think this came out in 2013. I don't think I got it till about 2014, so maybe a year after I came out. I have played it several times against other real players, not just playing it solo. You can play up to 4-player. I've only played it 2-player. When you play it 2-player, each side is composed of the 2 different factions, which we'll talk about here shortly. Anyway, let's get started with setup and how to play. I did want to mention real quick, my game came with this rule book. Then later I found there was a newer version of the rules on Board Game Geek, which I guess is the version of the rules that's implemented in the newer printings of the games. But I actually find my older rule book to be clearer and easier to understand than these new rules. I don't think there's any rule changes between the two, but there's just some things that seem clearer in the rule book that came in my game than the newer version that's in the more recent game. So anyway, I just thought I'd talk about that. Alright, first thing you'll do in setup is put out the game board. It kind of shows the East Coast. If you were looking like of a map of the United States, the East Coast would be this way, but the board lays out this way, so it shows the 13 original colonies, plus Maine, Quebec, and Nova Scotia. Alright, so the first thing is lay out the board. Then you'll choose one of the scenarios. There's the 1775 campaign, which I think is the standard game, which is what we'll be going over here. There's also an introductory scenario, which is just a little shorter version of the 1775 campaign. And then there's another scenario called the Siege of Quebec. And I haven't played that, so I can't tell you the difference between the standard rules, but we're just going to be going over the 1775 campaign scenario, which is the one covered in the basic rules of the game. Next, each player will choose their factions. If you're playing with 4 players, then one player would be the British Regulars, one the Loyalist Militia, and they would be on one side as a team, and one on the other side would be the Patriot Militia and the Continental Army. If you're only playing 2 players, which is the only way I've played it, the one side will play the Continental Army and the Patriot Militia factions, and the other side will play the British Regulars and Loyalist Militia factions. So they'll be on one side, and these guys will be on one side. So you'll take your components, all the cubes that go with your army. For the Continental Army, they've got 40 units, 2 battle dice, and then I believe 14 cards. But when you're playing the 1775 campaign, you only use cards 0 through 12. The cards above 12 are used in the Siege of Quebec campaign. The Patriot Militia has 45 units, 3 battle dice, and just 12 cards, and so they'll use all 12 of those. The Loyalist Militia has 45 units, 3 battle dice, 13 cards, and again only cards 0 through 12 are used in the regular 1775 campaign. And finally, the British Regulars have 35 units, 2 red battle dice, and they have 15 cards, and again, only cards numbered 0 through 12. And all these cards, they have a card number on the bottom. Only cards numbered 0 through 12 are used in the regular 1775 campaign. As I said, anything above 12 is used in the Siege of Quebec campaign. Alright, next thing you'll do is place starting units. If you look, some areas in the map have a number of units designated, so like 2 Loyalist Militia there, 1 Continental Army, and 1 Patriot Militia, or 1 Continental Army and 1 Patriot Militia here. Up here there's some Native Americans that get placed. So you populate the board with all the starting units that are depicted in the areas. By the way, the solid colored area, that's a colony, and then the individual bordered off pieces in between, that make up a colony are called areas. So let me get the board populated with all the starting units. Alright, I hopefully didn't miss any areas and got the board populated with all the starting units of both sides. Next you'll take these turn markers, which kind of look like the battle dice, but they have no icons on them. You'll put them in the bag, randomly draw out one. Alright, we got the Loyalist Militia. So at this point, the Loyalist Militia and the British Regulars each get to put 4 additional units each in areas that already contain units of their faction. Or not necessarily, I don't think it necessarily has to be their faction, but their side. So for instance, the Loyalist Militia get to grab 4 units and place them anywhere on the board where their side already has units. So, maybe where they think they want to take some battles. So they can spread them out or put them all in one place. So maybe he wants to put one there, maybe one there, and one there. And now the British Regulars get to do the same thing. So maybe they'll put one there, maybe one there, and I don't know, we'll just say one here. Now the Continental Army and the Patriot Militia get to do the same thing. So let me do that off camera. Alright, so I've placed 4 additional units for the Patriot Militia and the Continental Army. So now we go to the next step, which is just create reinforcement stockpile with any units that have not been placed. So basically for me, I just keep them here where they were. Next, starting control flags are placed. So at the beginning, one goes in Nova Scotia for the British, one goes in Quebec, and you push them on. You put them on these stars. That's where the control markers go. And the last one is Delaware, which is tiny little spot over here. And then the Continental Army Patriot Militia side place their control markers. And they start in control of Connecticut and little tiny old Rhode Island here. Now we'll talk about control. You control an area and can put one of your control markers there if or you control a colony and can put one of your control markers there if your side is the only one that has units in that colony. So at the beginning here, the British side is the only ones that have units in Nova Scotia, so therefore they control it. If there's areas in a colony that have both sides units, then it's not controlled. So for instance, that's why Maine is not controlled. But up here in Quebec, you can see that that area or colony only has the British side's troops, the Loyalist Militia and the British Regulars. So it's got a control marker, and then again, little old Delaware over here is just one little area by itself, and it's only got Loyalist Militia, so that gets a control marker. And for the American side, Rhode Island, it's a tiny little one. It only has Continental Army and Patriot Militia in it, so it has a control marker. And Connecticut only has Continental Army and Patriot Militia. But like Massachusetts, because there's British side troops here in Boston, then that's why that's not got a control marker. And if Native Americans are in a colony and they're not allied with a side, they can keep you from taking control of a colony too. So even though Virginia, starts out with some Loyalist militia in there, even if those weren't there, the American side would still not get to put a control marker in Virginia, because there's Native American units in there that are not allied with any side. So, and we'll talk about how those get allied later. But anyway, so those are the control markers that get placed at the beginning of the game. All right, next, each faction will shuffle its decks and then draw 3 cards into their hand. Again, these would not be these would be in your hand, hidden from the players on the other side. You can show your cards to, if you're playing with more than 2 players, you can show the cards to players on your own side. But anyway, each side will shuffle their deck and draw 3 cards into their hand, and I'm just kind of doing that real quick here. The deck is made up of 8 movement cards and 4 event cards. If you only drew event cards and no movement cards, then you would show your hand to the other players that's what happened. You would reshuffle your deck, including the cards you drew, and draw 3 more cards until you have at least 1 movement card. You have to have at least 1 movement card in your hand every turn. And finally, you place the round marker pawn on round 1 on the board. Place those turn cubes back, the blank turn cubes back in the black bag, and we're all set up and ready to play. Alright, so the game is played in a variable number of rounds, and at the beginning of each round you'll draw one of the turn cubes out of this bag, and whichever color is drawn, we'll just see what we got. We got blue. You put it on the first turn box here, and then that faction gets to take its turn first, which each player's turn has several phases. You have the reinforcement phase, movement phase, battle phase, and the draw cards phase. So let's talk about each of those phases. So, blue, we drew his cube. It would be his faction's turn. That's the Continental Army. So first you have the reinforcement phase. So in the reinforcement phase, you can take 4 cubes from your reinforcement supply. And if you have any units here in the fled unit space, which we haven't talked about how you get fled units in there, but if there are any fled units in the fled unit space of your color, you also get to take those. And then you can place them in city spaces, and city spaces are areas on the map that have this icon here. That's an icon of a city. So you can place your units in the reinforcement phase in city spaces of colonies you control. So at the very beginning of the game, the American side only controls 2 colonies, Rhode Island and Connecticut, and they actually comprise only 3 total areas, and each of them are a city space. So he can put all of his reinforcements in one space or split them up, however he wants to do it. But again, you can only put them in city spaces of colonies you control. So even if you controlled all of Maine, the only city space in Maine here is Falmouth. So you couldn't put them, in this space or this space, because you can only put them in city spaces. But at the beginning of the game, the Americans only control these 2 colonies with 3 city spaces. So we'll just say, as an example, he puts 1 in each of those, and maybe he thinks he's going to attack Boston, or I don't know. So maybe he's going to put one there. So, all right, he put his 4 reinforcement cubes out. That's the first phase of his turn. Alright, the next phase is the movement phase. So every time it's your faction's turn, you have to play one movement card. So if you look at your hand, his hand, he actually has 3 movement cards. And they have different icons on them. So this movement card means he can move 2 armies up to 2 spaces. This one means he can move 2 armies up to 1 space. And this is a warship movement card, meaning he can move 2 armies across sea or river areas that are connected to each other, which we'll talk about that in a little more detail in a little bit. But let's just talk about this one, for example, where he can move, if he played this one, he can move 2 armies up to 1 space or 1 area. So an army can be composed of units from 1 area. So this could be an army, or all these guys could be an army, or all these guys in this area here could be an army. Or if you wanted to just make an army of these 2 guys, you could just choose them and move them. But you have to decide which units from an area are going to compose the army you're going to move, and then you can move them up to the number of spaces. So again, this one he can move 2 armies up to 1 space. So if he said he was going to make an army out of these 2, they could move up to 1 space here or 1 space here. If you move them into a space where there's enemy units, they have to stop. So if he had played, for example, this one, that he can move 2 armies up to 2 spaces. If he made an army out of these guys, or all 3, it's whatever you're going to do, and moved them here, well, he would have to stop because he moved where there's enemy units. Where otherwise, if he wanted to move the full 2 spaces, he could move 1, 2, and move them into here, and then stop. You can't pick up units along the way, so he couldn't say, for instance, say he was going to move this army 2 spaces and move it here, and grab these guys and move them with him to the next. So you can't pick up units along the way. You can't move the same army twice. So, if he played the card where he gets to move 2 armies up to 2 spaces, he could move this army once, and then he couldn't then move this army again. So once units have been moved with an army, they can't move again that same turn. So again, a lot of these movement cards will show a number of armies you can move and the number of spaces they can move. There are, as we see here, we have this warship movement card. So this allows you to move 2 armies via water movement. When you move via water movement, you can move an army from that's adjacent to a body of water to any area that is adjacent to the same body of water. So for instance, if he wanted to play this one, he could move 1 army from Wilmington. Since it's connected to the Atlantic Ocean, he could move it to any area along the seaboard here, and actually he can continue. The Atlantic Ocean here is connected up here to this river, but it has to stop. He can't go any further than this bridge here at Quebec City. So you'll notice I didn't talk about these, but some of these land areas have what are like, I guess, bridges or land crossing. That's the only place that the armies can cross water. So if this army wanted to move here, well, it actually can move into either 2 of these areas because it's got a water crossing here, and he can move over here, and then there's one here. So that's the only way you can cross these crossers and bodies of water. But as I said, if you're moving from the Atlantic Ocean side, you could move from here up to here, but you couldn't go any further. You'd have to stop at that water crossing area. And again, this card lets you do that twice, so he could move one army, as I said, from Wilmington to New York City if you wanted to, and then another one from New Jersey to Boston. Oops. And what I haven't mentioned about any of these movement cards, but when your faction is playing a movement card, you can move other units, units from the other faction on your side with you, but at least one of the units has to be of the color of the active player. So currently blue is the active player, so he could move this army even though two of the units belong to the Loyalist Militia on his side. He has to have at least one. So he couldn't move this army or this army or this army, because the army he moves has to have at least one unit of his faction in it. And that goes for water movement or land movement. There's one other kind of water movement card we haven't talked about, and you can see here the Patriot Militia has this one. It's a boat movement card. And what that lets you do is move up to 2 armies composed of no more than 3 units. And of course, one of them has to be color of the unit of the active faction. So if Patriot Militia was playing this boat card, at least one of the units of the army he would be moving would have to be white. The other 2 could be blue, but he can move up 3 units. 2 armies of up to 3 units, and they can move from different water areas, but they have to go to the same land area. So he could, for instance, move this army from New Jersey to Boston, and then he could move this army from Portsmouth also to the Boston. So 2 armies comprised of up to 3 units, but they have to go to the same area. Whereas with the warship movement card, you can move, this one you can move 2 armies to completely different areas. So that's the only difference with the boat movement card. So that's how the movement phase works. So every turn, every time it's your turn, you have to play at least one movement card. Well, you can only play one movement card, so you always have to play one and only one movement card. But if you have event cards, you can play those, and they state, you can play any number of those, and they state what phase they can be played in. For instance, let's look at the Loyalist Militia's event card here. It says play at the beginning of the battle phase, and we haven't talked about the battle phase yet, but if you had if you had 2 event cards, that's the most you could have, because you always have to have at least one movement card. Again, as I said, if you draw your hand and you don't have at least one movement card, then you show your hand to the other players and shuffle all your cards back into your deck and draw again until you have at least one movement card. So if you had 2 event cards, you could play them both on your turn in the phase that they state they have to be played, need to be played in, or you don't have to play them during that turn if you don't want to. So, all right, so that's movement phase. So then the next we go to battle phase. So let's talk about that. So if during your movement phase, let's say, he had moved this army into here, and we'll just say he had moved this army into here. All right, so during blue's movement phase, we'll say he moved those armies in there. So then you go to the battle phase. So in the battle phase, the active player is the attacker, the other player is the defender. The defender always gets to roll first. So in this case, the active player decides what order the battles are going to be fought in. So if he says, all right, let's resolve this one first, since the Loyalist Militia is the defender, they would get to roll their battle dice first. You roll 1 battle dice for each unit you have up to your maximum battle dice. So here he would get to roll 2 battle dice. Since the Loyalist Militia have 3 battle dice, if yellow had 4 units in there, he would still only roll a maximum of 3 battle dice. But he's only got 2, so he would only get to roll 2 battle dice. And then, like the British regulars only have 2 battle dice, so even if they had 3 British regulars in there, you would only roll a maximum of 2. So anyway, that's how it works. But the defender gets to roll first, so he would roll these dice and apply the results. Now this target is a hit. The player who is hit gets to decide which unit they want to remove and put back in their reinforcement pile. So in this case, the player here would get to decide whether he removes a white or a blue unit. The other unit, or the other option we saw here that was rolled as a blank, which is called a command decision result. So with that result, you can decide to move 1 unit of that color into an adjacent area, as long as it's either an empty area or an area that contains your units in it, even if it had units of another. So for instance, if these guys were here and he wanted to use his command to move this guy out, he could move it in there because he has units in there. Or if the area is blank or empty, he can move a unit out of there. But if there's only enemy units in there, you could not use a command decision to move your units in there. And then you don't have to move your unit at all if you want to. That gives you the option. The other results on these dice are flee. If I had rolled this, a hit and a flee, one of yellow's units would have to come over here into the fled units. Remember, we talked about during the reinforcement phase, you get to put 4 units out of your reinforcement pile. If you still have them, you could run out. And then any units in the fled units box. So that's how units get in the fled units box if you roll a flee result. So those are the possible options. And the different factions have different die results they can get. In fact, there's a little player aid, and you can see here, Continental Army, their dice has 3 hits, 2 command decision, and 1 flee. Patriot Militia has 2 hits, 2 command decision, and 2 flee. We haven't talked about the French or the Hessians but anyway, you can see maybe the British regulars have possibly the best. They have 3 hits and no flee. But that's how the results of the battle dice work. So again, in this instance, because he's the attacker, he would roll his results. If he got that, he would flee 1, and then he would get 1 hit. So maybe this player would decide he's going to take a hit with white, and now he still has units, so he gets to take his turn. So he would roll 1 blue and 1 white dice. And he got 2 hits, which would kill the 1 yellow that's there. And now, because he's the only side with units in Maine, he would now get to put a control marker in Maine for the American side. And then after that battle's resolved, then we'd come up here and resolve this battle, where again, because blue's the active player, the British side is the defender. They would roll 1 red and 1 yellow dice. Then if blue still had units left, they would roll for what units they have. And then if there's still units left, if after both players have rolled there's still units left, then you roll again, beginning with the defender would get to roll for whatever units he has left, and so forth, until one side is the only person with units left in that area. And of course, the Patriot Militia, like we showed that he had an event card, so on his turn, at the beginning of the battle phase, he could play this card, where all Loyalist militia that flee in all battles this turn are replaced with Patriots, which stay in the battle. So, different events, but you can play. He could play that in the battle phase on his turn. Now, you can't play your event cards on another player's turn, even if they're on your side. You can only play them on your turn. So after all battles are fought in the battle phase, you go to the final phase, which is the draw card phase. You'll always have played at least one card, right? Because you always have to play at least one movement card. So then you draw back. If you had played some event cards, whatever, you draw back up to your 3-card hand size. And that's the end of your turn. Then we would draw the next, shake up the bag and draw the next cube out. And see, shake up the bag and draw the next cube out and see who's next. So then red would get to take his turn and so forth. Once all 4 factions have had a turn, then you advance to the next round, put all the cubes back in the bag, and start over by drawing the first cube out to see who's the first player for the next round. So how do you win the game? Well, each faction, at least one of their movement cards is going to be a truce card. It says truce there. So sometimes that may be the only movement card you have, and you have to play it. Remember, you always have to play one and only one movement card. So this one you get to move 4 armies up to 2 spaces, but then instead of putting it in the discard pile, you put it face up somewhere so that the other players know that that faction has played their truce card. Starting in the 3rd round, that's why the colors are a little bit different than the first 2 rounds. Starting in the 3rd round, if at the end of a round both sides of a faction have played their truce card, so if both Continental Army had played their truce card and Patriot Militia had played their truce card, starting at the end of the 3rd round, not the beginning. So they'll always be, even if Continental Army and Patriot Militia both played their truce cards, if these other players still hadn't taken their turns that round, they still would get to take their turns. Then at the end of the round, in which any side has played both their truce cards, then the game ends, and whichever side has more control markers on the board is a winner. It can be a tie. In fact, the last game I played against a real player in this, which was 2 or 3 years ago, we had a hard fought game, but it ended up in a tie. That will always happen by the end of the 8th round, just because there's only 8 movement cards in each deck. So there's no way the game could go further than 8 rounds. It certainly could go less than 8 rounds. In fact, I played this game yesterday, and I think it was by the end of the 4th or 5th round that both sides of one faction had to play their truce card, so the game ended at that point. And again, whoever has the most control markers at that point, at the end of the round, after both sides of a faction have played their truce cards, is the winner. And again, there can possibly be a tie. And kind of in a joking manner, it says if the game ends in a tie, then neither the British nor Americans win, and the America becomes a southern province of Canada. Anyway, we didn't talk about, there is a Hessian faction and a French faction that can come into play. The Hessians come into play on the British Loyalist Militia side, and the French come into play on the Continental Army Patriot Militia side. They come in through event cards that will tell you to put out, so many units. And they have their own colored dice, the French. These are for the Native Americans, which we still need to talk about, and these are for the Hessians. So again, those can come in through event cards, but the Native Americans do not come in through event cards. Well, some of their fled units do, but let's talk about how the Native Americans work. If you ever move one of your armies into a space, into an area that just contains Native Americans, then they automatically join up with your army. So you can then move them with your army with a movement card. If you ever leave them alone, then again they are neutral again, and another player's. So if you have Native Americans in an army that you move into battle, like in this case, you would roll 1 blue, 1 white, and 2 green dice for the Native Americans. If two armies, let's say this army had some Native Americans with them, and this army had they move in there for battle, and they've got some Native Americans with them. The Native Americans will never battle each other, so you will flee Native Americans from both sides until only one side has some left. So you'd start with this side would have to flee one, this side would have to flee one, then this side would have to flee one. Oops. Then this side would have to flee one. Now there's only Native Americans on one side. These would go into the fled unit space, and now the battle would take place. So that's how the Native Americans work. And again, some of the event cards will let you get fled Native American units, or some other ways to get them besides just moving them into moving your army where they're at and allying with them. There's a few event cards that let you get Native Americans in other ways, but that's normally how it works. So that's basically how you play the game. Why don't we go through a few example turns, and then we'll wrap it up. Alright, so we'll get to our example turns. I'm going to kind of leave the setup how we had it after I did the setup in the setup. I did reshuffle Continental Army's cards and had him draw 3 more cards. The other people, I'm just going to leave them with the 3 cards they had during setup. So first thing we do, we have the round marker on round 1. We're going to mix up the turn cubes and draw one out. And, well, blue again. Alright, so blue gets to go first. So first he starts with the reinforcement phase. And did I do that? I think when in my setup I had already done the reinforcement phase, so I've already put out 4 for blue. So I'm not going to do that again, but remember, what you would normally do is you get 4 units plus any fled units out of your stockpile, and you can put them in any city area of the colonies you control. But I think I did that during my rules explanation. So now we go on to the movement phase. So these are the cards he has. Let's see what event card he has. Add 4 French into Savannah, even if enemy occupied. It is. I think we're going to go ahead and play that. So play that during the reinforcement phase, which we're in. So I am going to play that and put 4 French into Savannah. That'll cause a battle. So there we go. I put 4 French units into Savannah. And so that's an event card. I still haven't played a movement card. So I've got 2. I've got one where I can move 4 units, 1 space, or a warship movement. I think I'm going to save my warship movement. I'm going to play 4 units, or 4 armies, 1 space. So first I'm going to move an army from here. Remember, it has to at least contain 1 blue unit. So I'm going to move these 3 guys. I'll leave this guy here. So that's 1 army. I'm going to make another army here and move them in there. That's 2 armies. because I have 2 more armies. Remember, I can move 4. I'll move this army in here, and I'll move this army in here. Alright, that's 4 armies. That's going to be 4 battles, or 3 battles. Let's do this one first. Alright, remember I'm the attacker, so yellow gets to roll first. Oh, well, we did the movement phase, now we're in battle phase. Alright, so yellow got this command movement, so he's going to be smart, and he's just going to move to this space here. He's going to use that. So now there's no point in me rolling because I've got nobody to attack. Alright, so now we'll resolve the battle here. So the defender gets to go first, so they get to roll 1 yellow and 1 red. They both got command movement. So they could, one could move here, one could move here, one could move over here. But they don't want to give up and let me take this colony, so they decide, well, yeah, maybe they figure it's better to flee and come back another day. So they're both going to move, and they're both going to move there. So again, no battle there, but now I'm the only one with units in New Hampshire, so I control that colony now. So the Americans put a control marker. They now control New Hampshire. Alright, we have this one bigger battle here in the Boston area. The red get to roll. Red only has 2, so they can roll 2 battle dice, and yellow can roll 1. So they got 2 hits and 1 command. So first I get to decide what I want to get rid of. I'll get rid of 2 blues, so that way I can still roll my 2 blue and 2 white dice. So these 2 blues just go back into my reinforcement area. And then red also has a command result, so he could, if he wanted to, move a red guy over here, which he's going to do, which means I no longer have the only control in New Hampshire, so now I lose that control marker. But now I get to roll here, so maximum of 2 blue dice, that's all the blue have, and then 2 white dice for the 2 white, so we'll roll and see what we get. Not very good, 1 hit, so he's going to kill off the yellow. Just comes back to the reinforcements. And then I got command results, which I don't want to move out, so that's all we do. So now battle again. Red gets to roll 2 red. Alright, red got a hit and a command, so I'll take a blue casualty. And red decides not to use his command. He's going to stay there. So now I get to roll 2 blue and 2 white again. Remember, there's only 2 blue dice, so even though I've got 3 guys in there, I can only roll 2. There are 3 white dice, but there's only 2 whites in there, so that's all he can roll. Ah, Lord, pitiful. Alright, 1 blue and 1 white have to flee, so they go in the fled units box. We got 1 hit, so red has to kill off 1 of his units. And then white could make a command movement, but we're going to stay there. So we have to battle again. So red gets to roll 1 dice, and he got a hit. I'm going to kill off the white. And now I get to roll 2 blues. Roll up here, that's a hit. So 1 hit, which is going to finish him off, and then 1 command, which I'm just going to stay there. And then now I control all of Massachusetts, so I get to put a control marker there. So we put an American control marker. And did we have another battle somewhere? I don't think so. I think that's it. So that's the end of the battle phase. So now we go to the draw phase. He's got 1 card, so he gets to draw back up to 3, and that's going to end his turn. Alright, to see who goes next, we got to draw another cube out of the bag. See what we get. We got yellow. So yellow gets the second turn. Alright, so first thing is his reinforcement phase. So he takes 4 units. And remember, he has to put them in city areas of colonies that his side controls, which they control Delaware, Quebec, and Nova Scotia. And that's it. So he can put, this is a city area, so he can put one there. Gosh, I guess he'll put one here. And city areas, I guess he could put some in one in Montreal. And yeah, he's going to put another one back here in Delaware. Alright, so he's put his 4 reinforcements out. Alright, so we go to the movement phase. He's got one movement card that's a move 1 army up to 3 spaces. He's got a boat movement and an event that lets him add +2 movement to all armies move this turn. I think he's going to play his boat movement card. So remember, he can move 2 armies with up to 3 units, and they have to go to the same place. So he's going to move 1 army from here in Halifax with 1 yellow and 2 red. And he's going to move that to Boston, which is connected to the Atlantic Ocean. And then he moves another army. And I think he'll move that army from here. And he's going to move 2 from Delaware, and they have to go to the same place. Remember, he could move up to 3 units with each one. So that's it. Now, that's all he can do. So he's played his boat movement card. We'll just put that up there. And now we go to the battle phase. Well, there's only one battle. It's here in Boston. Blue's the defender, so he gets to roll first. And he got 2 command movement, which is crap. But maybe he better take advantage of it and not lose his units, and he's going to do that. He's just going to move in there. Unfortunately, now we lose control of Massachusetts, but they won't roll any attack dice now. So that's all there is for the battle phase this turn. Now we draw cards. He only played 1, so he just draws 1 card into his hand. And now we go to draw a turn cube to see who goes third. Alright, get the mix here. We got red. Alright, red gets to get 4 reinforcements and put them in cities of colonies he controls. So he'll put 1 here in Dover, put 1 here in Halifax, put 1 up here in Montreal. Remember, that's a city, and in fact he'll put another one here in Delaware. Alright, so that's his reinforcement phase. Let's see if he has a reinforcement card. Yeah, he does. Play in the reinforcement phase. Add 2 British regulars and 4 Hessians into New York City. Alright, so he's going to do that. He's going to play that. So 2 British regulars and 4 Hessians. Alright, into New York City. There's his 4 Hessians and 2 British regulars. So they're ready to make a move, I think. Alright, let's see his movement phase. He's got 1 to move 2 armies up to 3 spaces, or 1 warship movement. Might be a good idea to use his warship movement to attack from New York City there, but I think he's going to do the 2 armies up to 3 spaces. So he's going to play that, and he's going to move he's going to make one army out of these guys, and he's going to move them 1, 2, 3 spaces. See, that's a space there, the line. So 1, 2, 3. So that'll be 1 battle. And he can move 1 more army up to 3 spaces. And so I think he's going to move these guys from New York. Let's say he's going to take, he's got to at least include 1 red. He's going to take all of these guys, and he's going to move here 1, 2, and here into Stanford, Connecticut. Alright, so now we're going to have a couple of battles. Right, we'll resolve this one first. Americans are the defenders, so we roll one blue and one white. Got one hit and one command. He's going to have yellow kill off a unit, and then white could he could move into Nova Scotia, which actually is a good idea because now he doesn't control all the areas in this, so he no longer controls this. Alright, now red gets to attack. So red will roll one red and two yellow dice. And he got two hits, which kills off the one blue that was in there. And now he controls all of the main colony. So he gets to put a marker there. And now we had one more battle to resolve, which was this bigger one over here in Stanford. So even though there's four blues in there, there's only two blue dice and then one white. So the defender gets to roll first, so we'll be rolling two blue and one white. Oh my god. So we got one hit and two command decisions. So he's going to decide he's going to kill off one of his Hessians. And I'm just going to stay there. I'm not going to use my commands to move off. So he gets to roll two yellow, two red, and two orange. Two red, two yellow, two orange. So this could be over real quick. Alright, well the two yellows flee. So they go into the fled box. He got two hits, so we'll kill a blue and a white. And then he got command, but he's not going to use those. Alright, so blues get to roll again. Two blues. Alright, let's get, oops. Well, those guys we know we're all in here. I should have a dice tray. Anyway, we got two hits. So he's going to take one, he's going to kill off both his Hessians. Alright, now he gets to roll two red. He got one hit. So we kill one blue, then he got one command, but he's going to stay there and fight it out. So we still have two blue in there, so we get to roll two blue. We got one hit and one command, so he's got to kill off a red. And blue's going to stay there, so now red will roll one red. He got a command. He thinks he better save himself, and he's going to move off in here back into New York. So that didn't work out quite as well as he would liked. That's all the battles. So now we go to the draw card phase. He spent two, so he draws two. And finally it's going to be white's turn. But we'll go ahead and draw his cube out of the bag. And he gets 4 reinforcements, reinforcement phase, plus he's got 1 in the fled. So he gets to place 5 units. Remember, in cities of colonies he controls, and we only control, right now we only control Rhode Island and Connecticut. So he's going to put them in Hartford, Rhode Island, like that. Alright, let's go to his movement phase. Alright, he's going to play a boat movement card, so he can move 2 armies with up to 3 units, and they have to go to the same spot. So he is going to, oh, you know what, we never had this battle that we should have done between the French and the, gosh, how long ago did I place those guys? Well, let's go ahead and do that now. Alright, so the yellow will get to roll 2 defense, and they get 2 hits, so that kills off 2 French guys. Alright, the French still have 2, they get to roll, and they got 2 hits. kills off the 2 yellows, and actually that gives control of Georgia to the Americans. That's another city they could have put units, but anyway, I forgot to do that a long time ago. So anyway, we're back to White's turn. They're playing a boat movement card. But now looking at the map, I don't really have a good spot where I can draw 2 armies from. So I'm just going to play, he's going to play this one army up to 3 areas. And just to kind of show how it works, he decides he's going to move this army just 1 area, but now he's joined with these Native Americans. So now they're 1 army. So whenever this army moves again, he can move these Native Americans with him. So anyway, he was only allowed to move 1 army up to 3, but he only moved it 1. So that's it. He's played his card. He didn't trigger any battles, so there's no battle phase. So now he goes to his card draw phase, and he just draws 1 card. He does still have a movement, so he's good. So that's it. That's the end of a round. Now you'd advance the round marker, put all the cubes back in the bag, and start over by drawing a cube and see whose turn it is. So anyway, I think that gives you a good idea of how the game plays. Again, you would continue going until any time after the end of the 3rd round, when one side has played both their truce cards. Once that round ends, then whoever owns the most colonies is the winner. So, right now the Americans have 1, 2, 3, and the British have 1, 2, 3. Right now it's a tie, but of course the game couldn't end at this point. Usually it's going to go to at least 4th or 5th round, probably. Anyway, I think it's a really fun game. It's got some good strategy to it. It's always tight. The several times that I've played it against another real opponent, and nobody ever just, overwhelms another player. It's always really close, or like I said, at one time I had the tie. Anyway, I think it's a really fun game. I've always had a good time playing this. There's another one by the same company. Gosh, what is it? That I own, 878 Vikings. It's very similar, although instead of the cubes they have little figures, which I kind of like that better. I wish they maybe made a version of this with figures. I don't think they do, but maybe they do. Maybe the newer version does have figures, but this is okay with the cubes anyway. Anyway, really fun game. I enjoy it, and hope I did a so explanation of it anyway. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.